do what he told you to do?
Because he threatened to kill me. Somebody told you we're gonna kill you and rape you. I was terrified.
He got out of the car and started coming around. I was just scared. I thought it was the end of my life.
When somebody tells you to stop, you stop, okay?
Do you remember what you said when you were telling him to stop?
Just stop. Just stop. Stop!
Kellen Winslow II seemed to have it all. He had an NFL Hall of Fame father. He was the 2002 winner of the John Mackey Award, which meant he was the best tight end in college football. He was a first-round NFL draft pick, and his 10-year career earnings were reportedly over $40 million. But in 2018, Kellen Winslow II's future was upended after he was charged with the rape of 2 women. And those would not be the only charges he would face.
The Winslow name starts with Kellen Sr. Kellen Winslow Sr. is a Hall of Fame tight end for the San Diego Chargers. He definitely made an impression on the community here as being one of those celebrity football players that everybody ends up loving and adoring. This case, with things that happened with his son, Kellen Winslow Jr., had a huge impact on our community.
Kellen was a first-round draft choice as a tight end, which hadn't happened in quite some time in the NFL.
He had wealth, he had fame, he had a family, beautiful wife. I'm not sure that's everything, right? Obviously, it wasn't for him.
He went from being an NFL superstar to raping, attacking women, homeless women. Any opportunity he had to sexually assault somebody, that's what he did.
San Diego County Sheriff's investigators say they were executing a search warrant on former NFL tight end Kellen Winslow Jr.'s home. He was out on $50,000 bail after his felony burglary arrest from last week. But just past 1 p.m., Winslow was rearrested, this time for 9 heinous charges.
Why did this continue to go on and no one interjected? He was manifesting inappropriate behavior for a while, and I didn't see anything that indicated that he was suggested for treatment or to seek out some assistance.
In the 2019 trial, Kellen Winslow was facing life in prison if he was convicted of multiple forcible rapes. He was facing charges related to Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 2, Jane Doe 3, Jane Doe 4, also Jane Doe 5, who was a woman that had been subjected to lewd acts that Mr. Winslow committed while out on bail, while under GPS monitoring, pending trial.
State of California versus Kellen Winslow. The record will reflect the presence of all counsel. Mr. Winslow is present. Are the people ready to give their opening?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Kellen Winslow is a man who has been given much, but it was not enough. You will learn over the course of the next few weeks that Kellen Winslow took what he wanted, not from 1, not from 2, but 3 women. He victimized 5 women. Over the course of this trial, you will hear from each one of those 5 women. And you will see what this defendant took. I am confident that you will decide this defendant's guilt for each and every one of the charges.
Courtroom was packed just about every day. There was certainly a lot of media attention. There were cameras every day. Mr. Winslow's father was there often.
Kellen Winslow's been honest from the start over a year ago. He admitted he had consensual sex with those accusers. Way back when. He was never dishonest about it. He admitted it a year ago. Those accusers aren't giving you the whole truth. So when you look at the evidence and the lack of the evidence, and you're not swayed by sympathy or dislike for Kellen's infidelity, I'm sure you'll come to the only right and just verdict there is, the verdict of not guilty.
Why did you do what he told you to do?
Because he threatened to kill me.
On St. Patrick's Day 2018, Kellen Winslow II was living the good life in Encinitas, California. He'd gotten married in 2006 and had 2 children, a son and a daughter, with his wife, Janelle. But 2 random meetings with 2 women, both in their 50s, would change Kellen's life forever.
Jane Doe I used to hang out on the streets of Encinitas, and at some point, she came across an individual who she claimed eventually raped her.
Jane Doe I was walking down the side of a road where she frequently walked. While she was walking along that road, a large SUV that ultimately proved to be Kellen Winslow's Hummer pulled up alongside of her, and Mr. Winslow offered her a ride.
She was picked up there and then driven to a crowded shopping mall and then raped.
What happened as you were asking for a ride for some of the cars that were passing by?
Well, this Jeep pulled over. So I jumped in the Jeep, started going, and then all of a sudden he goes, "I'm not going to take you to Vulcan. I'm going to take you to the store and f*** you."
Why did you do what he told you to do?
Because he threatened to kill me.
Jane Doe I presented as a very tough, hardened woman who I think has been through a substantial amount of adversity in her life. She is not what many people, unfortunately, come to expect from a sexual assault victim. They believe that certain people, when a crime like rape is committed against them, ought to act in a certain way, ought to talk in a certain way. They need to appear as shaken and vulnerable. And Jane Doe I was not that way.
He just got the sex done, and then he just jumped off, and he got out of the car and went to the driver's side, and he told me to get out.
Did you call 911 or report what had happened?
No, I did not.
Why not?
I don't know. I just didn't.
Victims have reasons why they choose not to report. Many people may not agree with them, but ultimately that is a choice that people do make.
Even though they didn't do anything wrong, that's what runs through their mind, and that's what motivates them sometimes to not report.
Did you get into the car because you felt comfortable that he was a neighbor?
No. I got in the car because he was the only one that stopped, and I wasn't going far. I felt comfortable in my neighborhood, and that's why I got in the car.
Why did you think he was a terrorist?
Well, if somebody told you they were going to kill you and rape you, I was terrified. I thought he was a terrorist.
You have to make a judgment call as you begin the cross-examination. You have an idea in your mind of where you want to go with cross, but you got to watch the jury the whole time. So when I start with any victim of sexual assault, I'm really not looking at the witness, I'm looking at the jury.
You testified before the lawyers and the judge, right? Remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And you remember you pointed out this man as being the individual who raped you. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay. This man I'm standing in front of.
Yes.
For the record, this is Mr. Watkins. Is that still the person who raped you?
No, it's the one next to you.
Yeah. In the prelim, you were pretty sure it was Mr. Watkins. Remember that?
Yes, I did say that.
On the day that this happened, did you want to have sex with the man who had picked you up in his car?
No.
Did you want to be taken to the back of that shopping center against your will?
No.
Did you want to perform oral sex on him?
No.
Would you have done any of those things if he hadn't threatened to kill you?
No.
I felt she was incredible. I thought her story made no sense whatsoever. She had every opportunity to escape, and just the way it was described is just impossible for it to happen. She claims that she was bleeding profusely in her white pants, but she continued on her day and walked 1 mile to downtown Encinitas.
She had asked me to look up the phone number for the Encinitas Sheriff's Department.
Did you ask her why she needed you to look up the phone number?
Yes, I asked her if everything was okay, and she said, yes, I was attacked, but I'm going to file a police report.
The daughter of Jane Doe I called the detectives and told her, oh yeah, I remember now that my mom told me that she had been assaulted.
Are you close to your mother?
We shared a room until I was 16. Yes, we are very close.
You clearly love your mother.
I do.
You were angry at what was happening to your mother, right?
Yes, I was upset.
You said, Mom, what happened?
No, I didn't.
Okay, I mean, your mom, this is the person you're really close to, right?
Yes.
16 years living in one bedroom together, correct?
Correct.
She's told you she's been attacked, and you don't have to say what happened?
No, I don't.
She came into the case only after she watched the coverage on court TV. One of my things in cross-examination was that Jane Doe 1 never told anybody about the offense, never told anybody about these bloody pants.
The incident occurred on March 17th, is that right?
Correct.
And you received these items on June 12th, is that right?
Yes.
So about 3 months after.
Yes.
Isn't it important to get items right after the event?
Correct.
Those pants were submitted to the crime laboratory for the San Diego Sheriff's Department, and the forensic biologist who conducted that analysis was able to find an area of the interior crotch portion of the pants that reflected that there was both blood and semen. That semen came back as a positive match to Kellen Winslow as the single source contributor. The blood was determined to be that of Jane Doe 1.
Jane Doe 2 was allegedly picked up by Kellen Winslow in downtown Encinitas, taken to a location and raped.
What was it about the separately reported incident that had common characteristics?
The suspect description of the vehicle.
And what were the common attributes regarding the description of the vehicle?
A black-colored sports utility vehicle.
Do you recall what about the suspect description in your case was similar to the other case?
A light-skinned black male.
Was there a description of tattoos extending from the arm all the way up to the shoulder?
Yes.
Can you tell us what happened after he pulled up?
He said, hey, do you want to go get some coffee? I said, sure, coffee.
Jane Doe number 2, she was solid in her testimony. I think she said one time in court, having a cup of coffee doesn't mean you can rape me.
He got out of the car and started coming around. I locked the door and he had the keys.
Why did you lock the door in that moment after you got
Because
out
I
of the
knew
car?
he was coming over to me.
What did you think he was going to do?
You know, rape me, I guess. I was just scared. I thought it was the end of my life.
The victims talked about how quickly he changed, which is not uncommon for some of these individuals, that they can be very nice and engaging, and then the door closes and everything changes.
When she testified at the trial, she had to relive that experience again, and now before the eyes of the jury, as well as all the cameras.
He opened the door. He held me, grabbed my arms, and he says, we're gonna have sex. And I said, please don't do this. I said it about 4 times. He said something like, it's a done deal.
She claims that this offense happened on a very major thoroughfare for Encinitas and would happen right there on the side of the road with the doors open. And this is a huge vehicle. There's no way that you would drive by and not see this rape which is taking place with the doors open.
You described a choking event inside of the vehicle. Remember that?
Yes, sir.
You described on direct that he applied pressure to your throat so hard that you couldn't breathe. True or false?
True. I know he's pretty smart. And I know he outside of me because he doesn't want to get caught.
You know because you've seen the pictures that there are no marks on your neck.
I never seen the pictures.
Overruled.
She was a very, very difficult victim to cross-examine. She played to the jury. She cried at the right times. She was combative at the right times.
She was raped late at night. She walked back to where she usually hung out and spoke to a friend, and they convinced her to go have a test.
Are you ever able to render any opinions or conclusions about whether or not there was consensual sexual activity in the act?
We cannot say whether anything was consensual or not, no.
When you spoke to Jane Doe number 2, did she provide you with a name that she believed was the suspect?
She described him as introducing himself as Kevin.
What was the true name of the suspect that you then had based upon all of the information at that point?
Kellen Winslow.
I wanted to say something, but I couldn't, so I was just frozen of fear.
When Kellen Winslow II was charged in 2018, the counts included indecent exposure. Because in addition to the 2 alleged attacks in March and May of that year, Winslow allegedly exposed himself to a 58-year-old neighbor. She'd been cutting flowers in her front yard. And according to law enforcement, she would not be his last victim before his trial began in May of 2019.
Jane Doe III was a woman who lived on Mr. Winslow's street. She was working on her garden, and then Mr. Winslow allegedly exposed himself while he was in his bike gear.
The day I was cutting flowers, and then I saw him, he like took off his pants.
What did you say to him when you saw him expose his penis to you?
I didn't look at his face, and then he walked away.
Do you remember calling the police?
Yes, I did.
He said, can he come again? And I say, no, I have my husband. I have husband. And then he take off his pants. And then I run over there. I run.
He take off his pants?
Yeah.
The fact that she called 911 at her husband's urging and reported this incident that led to that immediate report, I think, helped law enforcement understand that Mr. Winslow had, in fact, committed now an act just down the street from where he lived.
And then he comes.
He come in the yard?
He put the bike over there.
You put the what over there?
The bike.
We discovered that he had an app or a device on his bicycle. We were able to get some information from that, and it placed him in that area.
That showed his escalating behavior and the fact that he was not able to prevent himself from continuing to violate women in this way.
You saw this individual twice, and you told the officer that came to talk to you that the man was a few inches taller than you.
He is taller than me, but I don't know how taller, how many inches.
When you were asking her specifically about the height of the suspect, did she hold her hand over her head when she was describing how tall he was?
Yes, sir.
Did she point at you when she was describing how tall he was?
Yes, sir.
She told the DA that she didn't want to testify. She told the police she didn't want to testify. They dragged her in. And what did she say? There was a large black man who came and wanted to look at my flowers. And then it turns out he really didn't want to look at his flowers and just wanted to expose himself, and that was it.
You showed Jane Doe 3 the photo lineup, right?
Yes, I did.
And she did not identify Mr. Winslow, did she?
She did not.
Jane Doe number 5 came forward not because she wanted to, but ultimately because she had disclosed what happened to her in the gym by Mr. Winslow, and the gym manager reported it up their chain of command, and ultimately the sheriff's department was contacted by corporate counsel for Crunch Fitness to make this disclosure.
When you were going to the gym with your husband, was there a point in time where something happened that caused you to become uncomfortable?
Of course. That happened on the second floor when I was doing my routine of workout. At that moment, when I sat on that machine, he had his legs open and he was touching his penis. I asked him, if he's done with the machine, can I use it, please? And he get up. I want for him to leave. He didn't belong there. So I asked him to leave the machine.
When you saw that he had his penis in close proximity to you, did he say anything?
I wanted to say something, but I couldn't, so I was just probably frozen of fear. And he said to me with a very funny and happy face, "Do you see this?" Pointed his penis. He said, "Do you see this? Do you like it?"
Someone who was a large, intimidating presence selected her when she was alone in a second floor area of the gym and began to direct her attention towards his penis while standing a mere few feet away from her. That rattled her, and that really caused her to be fearful that he was going to do something more.
You saw him put his hand at or near his crotch, right?
Right.
He didn't show you anything, did he?
No.
You weren't afraid of him at that point because you're telling him to get off the machine, right?
If you're sitting next to somebody who's doing that, you are afraid.
She reported it to the staff there. They did the right thing and called the police. She was very reluctant to come forward. It was mostly fear. She didn't know what retaliation would come down the pike.
I look at two innocent girls and never would want them to ever feel like they didn't have a voice or that it's okay to say no.
It turned out that Kellen Winslow II's problems started long before he was arrested and charged with rape in 2018. Once the charges against him became public, other women came forward. The woman who became known as Jane Doe No. 4 saw news reports about a young man she knew in San Diego when she was just 17. Within days, she contacted the San Diego Sheriff's Department and told them her story, that in 2003, Kellen allegedly raped her while she was unconscious.
Jane Doe No. 4 was a situation where a lot of things were going to come into play. The rape happened 16 plus years ago. But talking to her, it was very fresh in her memory.
She kept that secret because she had a difficult time believing that anyone would believe her. When she saw that Mr. Winslow had been charged with committing these horrible crimes against other women, she felt compelled to come forward.
Were you being flirtatious with him?
Not initially.
Was he being flirtatious with you?
Yes.
Once he had started to be flirtatious with you, did you respond?
Yes. Me and him ended up walking upstairs to a bedroom.
Were you basically hooking up with somebody you had just met?
Yes.
After that first night when you met Mr. Winslow, did you see him again?
Yes.
Approximately how much time passed before you saw Mr. Winslow again after this first night?
Like 2 weeks.
Can you tell us what happened when you first got to this townhome?
I don't remember walking into the home. I do remember being in the bathroom, washing my hands, and trying to sober up. Kellen knocked on the door and told me to hurry up. I don't remember walking to the couch, just remember sitting on the couch.
Where were you when you came to?
Is it a bedroom?
Was he having sex with you?
Yes.
Was he having sex with you at the time that you regained consciousness?
Yes.
What did you do when you regained consciousness and you felt Mr. Winslow doing this to you?
Telling him to stop.
Did you actually say that out loud?
Yes.
Do you remember what you said when you were telling him to stop?
Just stop. Just stop.
Did you become upset?
Yes.
Were you crying?
Yes.
Going forward from this time, did you call the police in 2003 to report what Mr. Winslow had done?
I did not.
Why didn't you call the police?
The 17-year-old drinking underage. I slept with him 2 weeks prior. I didn't think anybody would believe anything I had to say.
Too many sexual assault victims choose not to go forward because they fear that no one will believe them, and that because there were no other witnesses to that crime, they just simply don't think that anything can be done.
What was it about your children that caused you to call the sheriff's department?
I look at two innocent girls and never would want them to ever feel like they didn't have a voice, that it was not okay, or that it's okay to say no and to be able to speak up.
Jane Doe 4 knew of Mr. Winslow and really wanted to date him. They had consensual relations, and then on the second one, she claims that she was raped by him while she was unconscious. You weren't sloppy drunk,
No.
right? You weren't falling over.
No.
You weren't slurring your words.
No.
Earlier today, you said that you didn't want to report it because you were a teenager and you'd been drinking, something to that effect, right?
Yes.
You don't remember very much of a particular segment of the evening. That's true, isn't it?
Yes.
We don't know how long that segment is, whether it's 2 minutes or 2 hours. We don't know, do we?
No.
My question to you is, you have said things in your testimony and in your interviews with law enforcement where you think that you may have done something or said something which contributed. So
When somebody tells you to stop, you stop, okay? Regardless of whatever I may have
said.
I don't know what I said.
Jane Doe 4 had a photograph of Kellen Winslow that was taken on the night that he raped her. She had kept that photograph specifically as a reminder of what had happened to her, that you can never be safe, even when you might think that you are.
When she asked you if you remember what happened to her, do you remember how you responded?
Yes.
What did you say?
I said, yes, I do remember.
What were you referring to when you told her, yes, I do remember?
That she was taken advantage of, pretty much. She said she was raped at that time.
Who was it that she said had forced himself on her after she was telling him no?
That was Kellen.
Mr. Winslow, the decision to testify is your decision and your decision alone. You have an absolute right to testify on your own behalf. Have you had enough time to discuss this decision with your attorneys?
Did Kellen Winslow II victimize 5 women over the course of 16 years? Had his defense team poked enough holes in the testimony of several of the Jane Does to leave the jury with enough reasonable doubt to set him free? Or was the state able to prove a pattern of behavior that would hold him behind bars for the rest of his life?
I think Mr. Winslow picked the times where there wasn't any witnesses. It was basically his word against theirs, which makes it very difficult because there's not a lot of evidence there. There's not a lot of other testimony to corroborate what the victim's saying.
I think that Kellen Winslow chose these victims, Jane Doe's 1 through 5, all because he did not believe that they would report it, and even if they did, he didn't think that a jury would believe them.
Mr. Winslow, the decision to testify is your decision and your decision alone. You have an absolute right to testify on your own behalf. Have you had enough time to discuss this decision with your attorneys?
Yes, Your Honor.
And is it your decision alone not to testify?
Yeah, I'm not going to testify.
Oh, all right, then I will instruct the jury according to the law which I just read to you. All right.
Yes, Your Honor.
Kellen is a very charismatic individual. Despite the charges in this case, if he was here in this seat, you would like him. And he's a very nice guy. He tells you the things you want to hear. He engages with you. He maintains eye contact. He would have been very, very good on the witness stand.
Kellen Winslow took from these women what he wanted. And make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, these women had something taken from them against their will, by force, because they were afraid. This man took what he wanted from them and threw them aside like a piece of trash, because that's what he thought that they were. Make no mistake, he has proven himself to be a sexual predator. This case is not a he said, she said. How could this case possibly be a he said, she said? This case is a she said, and she said, and she said, and she said, and she said. 5 separate women, 5 separate victims, all of whom have been confirmed and corroborated by each other. You as jurors have a duty to reject the defense theories because they're unreasonable. You have a duty to render true and just verdicts based upon the reasonable assessment of the evidence.
It's not one thing that causes people to go over that edge. It's a constellation of things. I saw Mr. Winslow say that he picked the number 81 because he wanted to be better than his father. And how he spoke about being, a soldier, being in war. He referred to the game in that way. In war, you have to have very little empathy.
It's a difficult thing to do. Essentially, you hold this man's life in your hands. While Mr. Owens was up here, I counted 21 times that he said there were 5 accusers. 21 times he said,
5 accusers, 5 accusers, 5 accusers, 5 accusers, 5 accusers. Another 9 times, he said, this is a deviant. He's a sexual deviant. He wants you to forget about the holes. He wants you to forget about the lack of evidence. And he just wants you to take bits and pieces from each individual victim and make the other cases stronger. And that's not the way it goes. I am sure that if you apply the law the right way, listen to what I said, that you can come to the only reasonable conclusion. And that is that Kellen Winslow is not guilty of the charges that have been levied against him.
People ask, why didn't you present CTE as the main defense? And the simple fact of the matter is, the most serious charges, the 2 rape, Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2, were what's called general intent crimes. The law does not allow criminal defendants to put on evidence of mental defect for general intent crimes.
The verdict forms are in order, and I'll ask the clerk to please read the verdicts.
The only thing that matters in any criminal case, and particularly a criminal case of this nature, are the 12 people in the box, nobody else. And that's who you play to. Doesn't matter what anybody else says.
Count 4. We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Kellen Boswell Winslow II, guilty of the crime of rape by force or fear. Count 6, guilty of the crime of indecent exposure. Count 9, guilty of the crime of lewd conduct. Count 10, not guilty of the crime of lewd conduct.
I've seen criminal defendants have the full gamut of reactions to jury verdicts. I think that Kellen Winslow was surprised, given his reaction, that he had in fact been found guilty.
The jury came back and they did not come to a unanimous decision. They were hung on Jane Doe 1. Jane Doe 4, they also hung. It was very much a split verdict.
As of June 11th, 2019, at 10:12 a.m., the jury remains deadlocked, signed by juror number 6. So juror number 6, is it your considered judgment that the jury is hopelessly deadlocked?
Yes.
It now appears to this court that this jury is hopelessly deadlocked with respect to counts 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, 11, and 12. I now declare a mistrial, and I will discharge the jury from further service in this case.
There was very much going to be a retrial as far as the prosecution was concerned. They said that, I want to say, pretty quickly.
I think he had very vulnerable victims. I think it was kind of hard to believe that he fell so far. I believe in juries. I'm sure there was substantial evidence. For the limited time that I actually watched him, I could just see a prosecutor being worried that a jury might find it hard to believe that he would, you know, do these kinds of really violent, disparate, brutal acts.
Is there any way I could get a couple minutes or no?
In November 2019, Kellen Winslow II was facing a retrial due to the number of counts that had resulted in a hung jury earlier that year. He'd been found guilty on 3 counts, 1 felony and 2 misdemeanors, and acquitted on another. But on the final 8 counts, that jury could not come to a decision. A new jury had been seated, and Kellen Winslow II was facing the possibility of life in prison.
All of the journalists are in the courtroom. It's a packed courtroom. Jury's in the hallway. We are ready to go for the retrial, and it's taking forever.
On the day of opening statement in the retrial, after having spent weeks arguing motions, ultimately leading to jury selection, going through countless jurors in order to arrive at the jury that we believed would be fair and impartial in the case, the defense approached me for the first time with an offer to resolve the case.
I made a kind of offhanded comment with the prosecutor about if we were in this range, I think we could, you know, this case would go away. He goes, really? I said, yeah, I think so. And then he went back and talked to his bosses, came back and goes, look, we might be close. So the judge did something in 33 years of doing this. I've never seen this before. He gave us the courtroom.
I know we've had a long lunch hour and you spent the last, well, about 2.5 hours talking to your attorneys. Is that correct?
Yes.
Has that been enough time for you to make an informed decision about your decision today? Because the option is to go to trial. We have jurors out there waiting to start with opening statements in about 10 minutes. So have you had enough time to thoroughly discuss this with your attorneys?
Yes, Your Honor.
The form indicates that you are pleading guilty, and the stipulated state prison term would be a range from 12 to 18 years. Is that your understanding of the plea agreement?
Yes, Your Honor.
You understand that the sentencing range would be no less than 12 years and no more than 18 years. Is that your understanding of the plea agreement?
Yes, Your Honor, and I pray to God that you give me 12 and I can go home to my family as soon as possible, Your Honor.
Ultimately, in my mind, I believed that it was appropriate to accept Kellen Winslow's admission that he did, in fact, rape Jane Doe 4, and that he was willing to admit on the record that he did, in fact, rape her in 2003, that he was also willing to give some sense of justice to Jane Doe 1 by admitting that he committed a felony sexual battery against her.
By pleading guilty under these terms, you avoid the possibility of spending the rest of your life in prison.
Yes, Your Honor.
You understand? I would imagine that's probably a motivating factor, correct?
It is. Your Honor, I would like to waive my right for a jury trial.
Winslow is hesitating several times, and as the judge is asking him, do you want to plead guilty? And at one point, he looked back towards where his family was sitting. And the judge said to him, I know that you looked back in the crowd. I'm asking you. And it did seem like he was struggling quite a bit.
Is there any way I could get a couple minutes or no?
He was less than enthusiastic about the plea, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that there was no deal up until, 2 hours prior. So it wasn't something he was able to sleep on. It wasn't something that he was able to discuss at length.
I don't want to let those jurors sit out there and wait any longer because I think the DA has their witnesses here. They're ready to start the trial. Mr. Winslow, I felt like I gave you ample time to discuss this with your attorneys. So I wanted to afford you the opportunity to make this very important decision.
What I believed was in the best interest of this case and was ultimately in the best interest of the victims who had gone through that process of testifying at trial, testifying at their preliminary hearings, and facing the prospects of testifying at a retrial, that ultimately it made the most sense to hold Mr. Winslow accountable and allow him to plead guilty to the specific acts against each one of those victims.
Yes.
Yes, what, you do admit that you committed those acts that make you guilty of count 6?
Yes.
All right, and then with respect to the amended added count number 9, which is the sexual battery, the factual basis states as follows. I touched an intimate part of Jane Doe number 1 while she was restrained in fear against her will for the purpose of sexual arousal. You admit that you committed those acts that make you guilty of count 9.
Yes.
I think that Mr. Winslow finally realized that he was forced to acknowledge what he had done, that he was forced to speak it out loud and tell the court that he was in fact guilty of those crimes.
I'm not saying that he's guilty of all these things. I know that he pled guilty to them. He made a decision that he wanted to do that. I think if these cases were tried individually, which I wanted to do from the beginning of this case, that we would have had acquittals on all of them.
I was in the courtroom, but because of COVID restrictions, there were only 2 or 3 people allowed up in the front to see the monitor that the judge looks at. So I was looking at the back of a monitor and the judge's face. And at that point, it was a fait accompli. It was going to be 14 years.
This is a professional athlete with women throwing themselves at him since he's been in high school, all the way through college. No one was checking him. And so why aren't there any other rape charges out there?
No one has the right to take someone's life, and it's not your life that has been taken. It's mine and the other victims. If you don't think rape affects a human being's life, you're damn wrong. It's affecting my life every day and every night.
If CTE is a degenerative disease and it continues to build and build and build and build, this is exactly what we're seeing here. Mr. Winslow, depression, anxiety, the self-medication, the years and years of head trauma built to this particular incident.
The issue that you have with CTE is you can't tell whether a person had it while they're alive, but you can look at the symptoms to see whether they're consistent with people who have been found to have CTE and exhibit those symptoms shortly before their death. In Kellen's case, if you think about high school, college, and his years in the pro, it was something in the area of 10,000 blows to the head he would have taken.
Mr. Winslow, this is your opportunity to address the court. Do you have anything you want to say?
Your Honor, I've been advised by my lawyer not to speak right now, but in the future I do plan to tell my story. But I've been advised not to speak.
He did not take any responsibility. It's the veracity with he spoke about his innocence. It was very casual and, nonchalant, and it didn't have a lot of solid feel to it.
Innocent man? What's that? Innocent man? I'm advised from my lawyer to not speak on much, but yes, I am innocent.
It just leaves us with someone who can only be described in two words, and that is a sexual predator. And that's what Kellen Winslow II is. He's a sexual predator. He preys on vulnerable victims and is very brazen in the way he carries out his crimes. So for that, the defendant's going to get 14 years in prison.
He's got to put together a relationship with his kids again, but he'll have a life as opposed to sitting there for the rest of his life in the Department of Corrections. So at the end of the day, I think it was the best outcome for him.
Ultimately, that the community should see from this prosecution that no matter who you are, no matter what privilege you may have, no matter who you are as a victim, whether or not you think you will be believed, that the authorities will do their jobs to achieve justice, to ensure that a person who commits sexually violent acts is held accountable.
Mr. Winslow may serve the 14 years, but it's likely, as the judge said, that he will be considered for the sexually violent predator law, meaning that even though he has served his time, he will be examined to see if it's okay to release him. He made some incredible threats with those victims, talked about killing them. So I think we're safe now, for now.
Kellen Winslow II remains behind bars, but could be released in 2029 or earlier, due to a California law determining what percentage of a sentence must be served. I'm Ashley Banfield. Thanks for watching.